All around us in the past few days are increasingly blatant examples of the attitude of the powerful towards freedom, specifically freedom of speech. It's my contention that while the actions we see are intimidating, they also crucially reveal the clumsy ineptness, the laziness of those who would rule, in that the methods employed now lack even the merest hint of sophistication. Those with the will and the intention and the desire to govern are revealed by every word and deed as profoundly limited people.
And I think the dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact have kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go, and people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle.
John Kerry, talking there, amongst friends, so to speak, feeling comfortable amongst his own kind. Kerry, who, I mean, if you don't know, sometime presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, more recently Joe Biden's climate czar, but in any event, a man who's been close to the centre of power for decades. Now, you heard him talk there about people self-selecting sources of information like it's a bad thing. Good God, are those people hearing stuff other than what we're saying, other than the stuff we want them to think? Seems to be the implicit. He talks about how people self-selecting their information make it hard to build consensus, right? Now, by which he means how it's hard now for people like him, for people like them in the World Economic Forum and other fora like it. It's hard to get everyone to believe what the state wants them to believe. And you and me, how all these free-thinking, free-speaking people make it hard for the so-called self-appointed elite to govern. By which he means, what he means by that is the freedom to tell everyone what to do and when, without fear of any voice raised in opposition. He said,
there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern.
He's saying this out loud to an audience in company of the sort of people that he approves of, but it's in the public domain, and he knows that. This is jaw-dropping stuff. They're in the company of like minds. He's calling the First Amendment a major block to getting his way. I can't hear James Madison's First Amendment often enough because it's so cleverly, it's so sensitively and knowingly worded. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. With those words ringing in your ears, let's not forget New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern at the height of the so-called pandemic, when she said,
"We will continue to be your single source of truth."
The we there being her government, single source of truth. Anything else is just rumour, if not downright lies, We, the government, will be your single source of truth. Since when? But look at what has come out of these single state sources of information. The likes of John Kerry predicting all sorts about the climate that never came to pass, unfounded claims, if not downright lies, about the so-called vaccines being safe and effective, when the officials saying as much absolutely knew the jabs would not stop transmission and wouldn't stop you getting ill. And then, the likes of, what else have we had? The likes of Russiagate from Hillary Clinton, lies about Trump that she still pushes, even though they've been proven to be lies and propaganda. She still repeats it now. The scores of officials from the US intelligence community who got up on their hind legs and testified that the Hunter Biden laptop was a fake, that it was nothing but Russian propaganda. The Hunter Biden laptop was subsequently proven to have been quite the contrary. It was real. And everything on it was as had been revealed hitherto. But, there at the World Economic Forum, John Kerry reveals, he's the one who has usefully this week revealed that he even proudly identifies freedom to speak as the problem. He says that the First Amendment is the major block in the way of the state being able to push a false narrative.
I think democracies are very challenged right now and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And to me, that is part of what this race, this election is all about. Will we break the fever in the United States?
Now, don't forget that John Kerry served in the Vietnam War briefly and came back to the States and joined the protests against the war, against Lyndon Johnson's government, against what you might say was the state consensus on the subject of the Vietnam War. But now Kerry finds himself among the powerful. He's married to a billionaire heiress. And he finds dissent of the sort he offered half a lifetime ago a major problem that has to be hammered out of existence. This is where we are. Now, also where we are is on account of the internet. The internet that has been free, that is still free. And in what was surely an unintended consequence, the free internet that we have known enabled people to find the truth for themselves and share it. And that, as it turns out, is a problem that the self-proclaimed elites don't know how to deal with in any sophisticated, far less subtle fashion. Now, there have always been state secrets. As long as there have been nation states, there have been state secrets. Information that the ruling group deemed too sensitive or too troubling for general consumption by the likes of you and me. You go back to somebody like Machiavelli and the Prince. Machiavelli makes plain that morality is not necessary for the ruler, or therefore, by extension, is not necessary for the government, for the state. The prince, the state, whatever, creates law and creates morality and is above both. The point of Machiavelli in many respects was that the subjects, folk like you and me, must be controlled by morality. People like you and me must behave morally, because it's only when we're moral that we submit to obeying the law. And so there's a double standard within statecraft, that the people running the state don't have to be moral at all. In fact, quite the contrary. We've had centuries of thinkers, clever, educated, thoughtful people agonising about how much power should be ceded by the people to the state in a contract, in return for safety, in return for peace. We've had centuries of clever people trying to work it out. You know, when it comes to the social contract, you've got the likes of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. You know, Hobbes said political order is possible only when human beings abandon their natural condition of judging and pursuing what seems best to each and delegate judgment to someone else. And Hobbes said that without peace, humans live in continual fear and danger of violent death. And therefore what life they have is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish and short. So you've got thinkers working it out, contemplating what it is to be a state and govern a state. Until now, where we are now, when you have a powerful class of psychopathic parasites who honestly believe the law only applies to the pesky people. Only the little people have to obey. Only the little people have to abide by morality. The powerful consider themselves to be beyond the law. And this explains the millions of pages of legislation that they draft and pass, because the law is simple, based on variations on the theme of the Ten Commandments, really. But legislation is the workaround. The pages and pages are the way the powerful have found to get around the law and thereby do what they want. Now, that clip of Tucker Carlson talking about the doings and the thinkings of Mike Pompeo of the CIA, erstwhile director of the CIA. You know, he talks about, Tucker Carlson talks about how the files on the John F. Kennedy murder are still withheld from the people. They were withheld by Trump, withheld by Biden, even though the statute of limitations on them being withheld is passed.
Secret. There's no living person connected to the Kennedy assassination. It was a couple generations ago. There's no one person whose secrets are being protected. It's an institution, or maybe countries. There may have been countries involved too. I mean, I don't know the answer, but there's clearly something worth protecting.
And Tucker spoke there about having been in touch with someone who had seen the documents. And that person had intimated to Tucker that within them, you know, the reason for them being kept secret still was that there was something that was worth protecting. And so Carlson went on TV and said that the CIA was involved in the killing of John F. Kennedy, as he had been told by that person who had seen the documents. And then the next, I mean, that thing about, you know, sitting in his car and he gets the call from Pompeo's lawyer, you know, warning him.
He's threatening me.
Putting the frighteners on him. You know, that to reveal the contents of a document like that was a crime. And you know, as Tucker rightly says.
What about the actual crime, which is murdering a president? Like, you're covering up for that, Mike Pompeo.
What did he say to that?
And so Mike Pompeo pressed Trump to maintain the secret. And then Pompeo was caught plotting to murder Julian Assange, as Julian Assange has said in the past few days, having broken his silence, finally, after a dozen years in incarceration. You know, as Tucker said, federal employees are not allowed to just kill people they don't like. And yet it's on the record that Mike Pompeo colluded with others to do just that. And yet Mike Pompeo is still out there. He's tipped to be Trump's Secretary of Defense if Trump wins the next election.
It is now a matter of public record that under Pompeo's explicit direction, the CIA drew up plans to kidnap and to assassinate me within the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and authorised going after my European colleagues, subjecting us to theft, hacking attacks, and the planting of false information.
The law is in the way of these people, just as the First Amendment and the Constitution of the United States is in the way of these people. In truth, it always has been. But their flouting of it and their use of workarounds to avoid it has mostly been kept from our sight. Up until recently, we weren't able to see the depths of what was going on. But here we are in this new era, you know, this free internet that looks like receding into the past tense with every passing day. in which the ins and outs, the reality of statecraft have been revealed to more and more of us. The dirty dealing, the willful lying. All that used to happen in secret, in the shadows, is now routinely exposed on the internet. The game has changed, but the oligarchs and the powerful are still playing the same old game, as though they still have the ability to keep and conceal secrets. I think a lot of it is explained by a theory like betrayal blindness, in which a victim of abuse by a trusted other has so much time and effort invested in the relationship, not to mention trust invested, that to contemplate the reality they're being abused and that they should do something about it is just too much to bear. So it's easier instead to get angry with anyone who tries to tell them their partner, in this case the state, is abusing them. And this, I would say, this is why, even in the face of so much revealed, and so much has been revealed, and so much more is revealed with every passing day, so many huge lies, so many people still are too frightened of contemplating that new disturbing reality, that they just watch someone like a John Kerry or Hillary Clinton and they let the lies slide by like water off a duck's back. So when someone like Julian Assange or someone like Tucker Carlson calls it out, calls the lying for what it is, it's still easier for too many people to blame the messengers instead. The problem, and it's a problem for all of us one way or another until we find a solution, the problem is that all of that behaviour has previously been hidden from the people to a greater or lesser extent. The media has been in the pay of the state, so supposed leaks and scandals happened by design. I don't know, the Profumo affair or whatever, limited hangout. That much revelation comes with the consent, or used to come with the consent of the state, because it didn't make any difference to the bigger picture. But now the internet and a manifestation of its potential in the form of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange was like X-ray specs, revealing all, exposing the reality of so-called statecraft. And this has happened. The advent of internet came upon them when the state is the creature not of any group with any sort of morality or restraint, but of oligarchs bent only on wealth, control, and ultimately power. Maybe a more sophisticated response will be conjured into being. Maybe not, but there's no sign of it at the moment. We are in the grip of crude and blunt people, crude and blunt in their exercise of power, wholly lacking any kind of sophistication. So what we have, instead of thinking people like Hobbes and Locke and Rousseau, we have oligarchs, arrogant, but persuaded of their own right, more complete even than divine right, because at the peak of the ziggurat, we have oligarchs who consider themselves more than gods, whose only response to the situation created by the internet is that of someone who, having only a hammer, treats everything as a nail. They lack the wit or the sophistication to do anything else but try and hammer every nail flat, in plain sight. So gone are the sophisticated, thoughtful people who considered issues at length. Those in power are not like that. They're not learned. I think their wealth and their inherited power persuade them they don't even need to be learned or sophisticated. Machiavelli said a leader had to have the nature of a fox and also of a lion, that he needed the cunning and foresight of the fox and the fierce strength of the lion. But more and more, the self-professed elites blunder around like bulls in a china shop. No foxes, no lions, just bulls. So that, you have someone like Tim Walz saying...
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
There's no exception in the First Amendment to enable the criminalising of so-called hate speech, for example, because James Madison and others understood that hate is subjective, that it's at the mercy of the powerful making judgments about what is hateful. But there you have it, a senior man running for Vice President of the United States of America who doesn't even understand his own country's constitution. That's beyond frightening. It might even be ludicrous and laughable. So these people, whether they're dullards or just playing games, much too arrogant as well, even for their own good, who are determined that all they need to do, perhaps all they can do, is shut people up, make it illegal to disagree with the state. So we have censorship in all its forms, exploiting the fear of nothing less than imprisonment as the punishment for telling the truth, when the truth is inconvenient to the powerful, up until the point we've reached, most recently, when characters like John Kerry are talking openly about freedom of speech as an obstacle to power, an obstacle to building consensus and the ability to govern, as Kerry describes it. And he's hardly alone. Hillary Clinton is to the fore, insisting that what she calls the narrative has to be consistent, which is the same as saying the powerful must eradicate all dissent, any voices that question their narrative. Far less openly challenges their narrative. It's all so shockingly unsophisticated apart from anything else. It's so clumsy and so blatant and so arrogant. Robert Burns said in a poem called To a Louse, the setup is that he's in church and there's a pretty woman sitting, and there's a louse is on her hat, and everyone's looking at her and smiling, and she thinks they're smiling at her prettiness because she doesn't realise, what it is that's making everybody smile. And he says, Robert Burns says in the poem, well, I'll translate it for those who aren't Scottish, that he wishes someone had the power to let us see ourselves as others see us. And I see the truth is that in their overweening self-importance and hubris, the powerful now don't see themselves as we do. They don't even realise that we see them, but we see them. And it's beginning to dawn on them, and it enrages them. But better than that, it frightens them into doing ever more ridiculous things. This is where we are now. We can see them. We can watch these clips and we can dissect these clips and we can see them. And it's their own nature that will be their undoing.